All right, let's talk about the story of, well, us. And I don't mean just the last few hundred years. I'm talking about our entire 4 million-year journey. It is an absolutely epic story of evolution and revolution that took our ancestors from the African savanna to literally every single corner of this planet. And believe it or not, we're going to try to cover it all in just the next few minutes.
Just let that sink in for a second. For 99% of the time humans have existed, we were wanderers, nomads. Our bodies, our brains, our societies, everything about us was shaped by a life on the move. And then, in what is basically a geological blink of an eye, one single decision about how we get our food changed everything. That right there, that's the pivot point for our entire modern world.
You know, this timeline really puts our whole journey into perspective. Our story doesn't start with kings or empires. It starts 4 million years ago with early ancestors like Australopithecus. Then it takes this huge leap 2 million years ago with the globe-trotting Homo erectus. And us, Homo sapiens, we're kind of the new kids on the block, showing up only about 200,000 years ago. And that huge revolutionary decision to start farming, that was practically yesterday, just 12,000 years ago.
So to really get this, we have to start by meeting the family. And I mean the deep family. This isn't some simple, straight line. It's more like a sprawling, messy tree, full of evolutionary cousins and long-lost relatives. Some of those branches eventually led to us, and others, well, they just hit a dead end, which is fascinating in itself.
Yeah, it's really tempting to think of human evolution as this one giant leap, right? Like one day we were apes and the next we were human. But the reality is so much more like how your smartphone evolved. There wasn't one single invention of the phone. Instead, it was this long series of gradual upgrades, year after year, small biological tweaks and adaptations that just built on each other, eventually leading to the model you see all around you today, us.
So who are these early family members? Well, first up, you've got Australopithecus. You've probably heard of the famous Lucy fossil. Their crucial gift to us, walking upright. Then came Homo habilis, the handyman, whose bigger brain led to the very first simple stone tools. But the real game changer was Homo erectus. They were taller, smarter, and they were the first to master fire and the first true explorers to actually venture beyond Africa.
And finally, that brings us to, well, us, Homo sapiens, the wise human. We showed up on the scene in Africa around 200,000 years ago. Now, we weren't the strongest out there, not by a long shot, but we had a revolutionary superpower. Complex language. This was our secret weapon. It allowed us to plan together, to create shared myths, to cooperate in massive numbers, and, ultimately, to completely reshape the world.
Okay, so how did we go from one spot in Africa to being everywhere? For decades, the main theory was the out-of-Africa model. Basically, we evolved in Africa, spread out, and just replaced everybody else. But here's where the story gets a really fascinating twist. Recent DNA evidence shows it wasn't nearly that simple. We met, and in some cases, we interbred with other human species. So the real story seems to be a much more complex mix of migration, replacement, and connection.
But spreading out across the entire world was anything but easy. I mean, it required surviving in these incredibly harsh, unforgiving environments. And that survival really depended on some amazing ingenuity, the development of better tools, the mastery of fire, and the birth of what we would call culture.
You can literally see our ancestors' minds getting sharper just by looking at their toolkits. The journey starts with these really simple Oldowan choppers. They're little more than smashed rocks. Then you see this huge leap forward, the beautifully symmetrical Acheulean hand axe, a tool that required real planning. Finally, you get the refinement of Moustarian tools, with specialized flakes being carefully crafted into deadly spearheads. This isn't just about tools, it's like a fossil record of the mind itself.
And of course, you can't talk about this era without talking about fire. Mastering fire wasn't just another step forward, it was a quantum leap. All of a sudden, we had warmth against the cold. We had a weapon against the predators of the night. Cooking our food unlocked this huge new source of energy for our growing brains. But maybe, just maybe, the most important thing was that the campfire became our first living room, the center of social life, a place for telling stories, and the forge where communities were built.
But survival wasn't just about physical tools. It was about the inner world of the mind. And then suddenly, deep in caves across Europe, we see this explosion of art. I mean, breathtaking paintings of animals, mysterious carved figurines. This wasn't just decoration. This was the birth of symbolic thought.
The moment we started representing the world in our minds. That is a truly human thing.
So now, armed with better tools and this new kind of mind, our species was ready for its greatest adventure yet, settling the entire planet. This was the original Great Migration, an incredible story of exploration done not with ships and compasses, but with small family groups with stone tools and just immense courage. And here's a weird twist. One of our greatest aids was one of the planet's harshest climates, the last ice age. With so much water locked up in these massive glaciers, sea levels just plummeted. This revealed new land, creating these natural highways between continents, like the famous Bering Land Bridge that let the first people simply walk from Asia right into the Americas. But they didn't just walk over land bridges. By at least 45,000 years ago, our ancestors were pulling off something even more incredible, building seafaring rafts and navigating the open ocean to reach Australia. Now, this was no accident. This was humanity's first great voyage of discovery.
But as we spread out, we weren't alone. We met other human species, like our most famous cousins, the Neanderthals. And what happened to them is one of history's great unsolved mysteries. Did we outcompete them for food? Did we fight them? Or was it less dramatic? Were their smaller populations just sort of absorbed into our much larger, expanding gene pool? Honestly, the jury is still very much out on that one. And now we finally arrive at that single decision I mentioned way back at the start, the moment that ended 99% of our history and set us on the path to the modern world. This was, without a doubt, the most profound transformation our species has ever gone through.
It's known as the Neolithic Revolution. And what's totally wild is that it didn't just happen in one place. It started independently all over the world around 12,000 years ago. From the Fertile Crescent to China to Mesoamerica, different groups of people all made the same radical choice. They stopped chasing their food and decided to grow it. They domesticated plants and animals, and for the very first time, they settled down.
For a long time, we all assumed people started farming, that created a food surplus, and then they built complex societies and temples. But the discovery of a place called Göbekli Tepe in modern-day Turkey just turns that whole idea on its head. It's this massive, sophisticated temple complex built by hunter-gatherers 1,000 years before farming even existed in that area. It raises this mind-blowing question: did the need to gather and cooperate to build a religious site actually kickstart the invention of farming?
But this huge shift to farming, it wasn't a simple upgrade. It was a massive trade-off. It came with a whole new set of rules that would reshape every single aspect of human society, for both better and for worse. And the trade-offs were pretty stark. The hunter-gatherer life, it was uncertain, but it offered a really varied diet, and surprisingly, a lot more leisure time, all in small, pretty equal groups. Farming, on the other hand, it meant a reliable but often monotonous diet of starchy crops. It meant longer hours of backbreaking labor, and as villages grew into cities, it meant the end of equality and the beginning of social hierarchies.
So what was the final tally? Well, the big pro was food surplus. This fueled massive population booms, and it allowed for specialization. So suddenly you have artisans, soldiers, priests. But the cons, they were severe. Crowded settlements became breeding grounds for disease. Relying on just one or two crops meant a single drought could cause mass famine. And for the first time, society saw deep, systemic inequality and the creation of rigid new social roles.
Which leaves us with one last kind of mind-bending question.
We always think that we domesticated wheat, a triumph of human ingenuity.
But what if you look at it from the wheat's point of view? It managed to convince a clever ape to clear entire forests, kill all of its competitors, and then work tirelessly from dawn till dusk to spread its seeds all across the globe. So you really have to ask yourself, who really domesticated whom?